The Beer and Pretzel Podcast and Trash Talk Podcast are part of the But Why Though and Podfix networks.
Check them out to hear more content from other great podcasters.
Hello, my name is Austen. I'm the main host, and I am the GM of the Beer and Pretzel Podcast. We're a podcast that examines different one-shot role-playing games. Pretty much we try to play and try out different role-playing games that are not the world's most famous role-playing game. We play them on our show in a bunch of actual play episodes, and we do reviews of the games that we play, and we also talk to the game creators. Today, I'm here with Gavriel. We've been talking for a while about two role-playing games that you have already put out there in the world, and also you have a new one that's coming out. Actually, it's out right now. First of all, Gavriel, thanks for coming on the show and talk to me about your role-playing game experience.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Austen. Much appreciated.
Before we jump into it, we're going to be talking about, in this interview, your free games. Neurocity was the first one, and then you have Warpland that came out, I think it was last year, was it earlier this year?
Last year, yes.
Last year.
Yes.
And right now, if people have enjoyed playing your games, or if people are interested by the premise of your newest game, they should go check it out. I'll put the Kickstarter link in the description below. You have a new game out called Hell Knight, and we'll be talking about that during this episode. Before we talk about those, let's talk about how you got into role-playing games, but also write-in for role-playing games, because there's, of course, thousands of people out there that play role-playing games, but only a select number who actually have made, like you, 3 different games at this point. So how did you get into write-in for role-playing games? Like, was Neurocity the first game you made, or was that just like the biggest one that came first? Or what role-playing games did you develop coming up to your games that you're working on now?
I started playing role-playing games at about when I was about 15 years old, and I always liked to be a GM. I like to tweak my own version of the settings and my own version of the rules. So for me, came naturally to start making my own games. But it was only 3 years ago that I decided to publish one of them, Neurocity. Initially, I wrote it in Spanish and tried to sell it unsuccessfully in the Spanish market. Then I translated it to English, and I was surprised by the good reviews and the feedback from the community, and that kept me going for more.
And that's what I was about to ask you next, actually, was what is the role-playing game scene where you're at, which is in Argentina? Because here in the United States, Dungeons & Dragons is obviously the biggest game by far, but there's a decent scene for people that are playing indie role-playing games. And of course, our podcast is all about discovering independent role-playing games. But where you're from, it sounds like you said that you first did it in Spanish, and then it wasn't super successful. And then once you made it in English so that more people can read it, then it started really picking up and people have been playing it and giving you some really positive feedback. So where you are in Argentina, for people who play role-playing games, what do people mostly play?
Here in Argentina, the market is quite small. Most people still play traditional role-playing games like D&D and Pathfinder, or Call of Cthulhu. A bit maybe of World of Darkness or the old World of Darkness. I think that we're a bit late behind what would, I think they are calling it the new OSR movement, right?
Yeah.
What I consider that's an interesting movement for me. Brazil, on the other, our neighbors, the Brazilians, on the other hand, they are launching very cool new stuff, especially from the hand of Diogo Nogueira. For some reason, the Brazilians have the edge, the advantage on that. We are still have a long way to learn. People are still just started to become aware of what can indie creations add to the RPG scenes? For me, I have been playing independent role playing games for a decade or so. I love them. I love the style an independent creator can give to a game. I think for me, a role playing game is art, and art can only be to some extent be done in a community form. I think it should be personal, independent, and independent mostly from companies, from corporations.
I agree 100%. Like everyone that we've talked to on this show, like almost everyone, while they are very talented at what they do, making role playing games for them isn't their main job. It's kind of like a side hobby to them or a side gig. And they have a main job that they do for their main source of income. So for them, they make role playing games not necessarily for the money, but because it is an expression of their own art. With like some companies like Wizards of the Coast, I like playing Dungeons and Dragons like everyone else, but at the end of the day, that corporation is really a corporation, and they're making so many books every year for Dungeons and Dragons, not necessarily because the game needs it, but because it generates a lot more money. While you and all the rest of the game creators out there, you guys are pretty much just making your games because you want to see your game out there and people playing it. Because for indie role playing game creators, there's not a lot of money out there, but you do it for the love of the art. So you're talking about games that you have been playing. You like to play indie role-playing games. What have you been playing recently besides your own games, like playtesting your own games and playing it probably with your friends? Besides your own games, what are you normally playing?
Honestly, Austin, in the last 7 months, I have been playtesting my games like a maniac. So I didn't have much time to play other games. I played a bit of Black Sun Death Crawl. I don't know if you are familiar with that game. I consider it a precursor to Morgborg.
Hmm.
Have you heard about it?
I've heard about it, but I haven't played it. But if it's kind of like something that kind of led up to Morkborg, I might want to try it out.
Yes, it's basically a fantasy setting, but the idea is that a black sun is coming closer to Earth and is killing everything. Like right now, it's happening right now. So the players need, the characters need to like go underground, and it's eventually suited for one shots, because the idea is that sooner or later they will all die. So it's like a super brutal Morgborg.
I can kind of see the
in nightmare
inspiration
mode.
for it for your game Warpland too.
Yes, of course, yes, has something about it, yes. But Warpland deals with mutations, right?
Mm, yeah,
And
true.
Black Sun Deathcrawl is just like pure death.
Okay, I can see. Yeah, I guess that
the
comes closer
author,
to
the author
Morkborg.
is James Buck George.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. It does look like a cool looking game. Yeah, I'm surprised I haven't played it yet. But yeah, Black Sun Death Crawl, that looks like a fun game. So that makes sense, though, that you haven't had a lot of time to play other role playing games because you've been playtesting your own games, which is kind of like
Yeah.
the best way for you to take a game and see if it works, to see
Yes.
if every mechanic works and if everything's balanced and if it's going to be like fun for people to play. So I assume you've been recently playing Hell Knight over and over with different people. So what, of course you have your friends and family to play, but is there any way for you to find people that you don't know to play your games? Like, is there any kind of community or place that you can go to try to get people to go, hey, can you play this game with me? It'll be fun. It'll help me develop this game more.
Yes, luckily, just when I started with Warplan, a few guys from my country got close to me and decided to be like official play testers for the game. So I basically have two play testing groups. One is like from my inner circle, another are guys that I can send them what I'm writing and they will try it out and give me valuable feedback. So yes, definitely. I need two groups to test it, and I need 4 or 5 months play tested extensively.
So if right now you're doing playtesting, that must mean that Hell Knight, maybe besides of you're probably putting like the art to it and format and everything, but does that mean the game is pretty close to being done besides playtesting it to make sure everything works out good?
Yeah, playtesting is finished. It's already finished for some time. The game is already written. It's only being designed. I'm working closely with the graphic designer, Tommaso Spicoli, who is a very talented fanzine artist with almost a bit more than 30 years of experience. He's like a bit of a legendary skater, musician, artist figure here in Buenos Aires. So I'm very stoked to be working with him because he works everything like in a very old school DIY approach. He doesn't use internet at all. He still uses glue for some of his work. So the idea is to show a product that will be basically done in an old school way.
Let's talk about Neurocity, Warpland, and now Hell Knight, which is on Kickstarter. So obviously I know about your games, and hopefully pretty soon I'll be running it with the people I normally play with and maybe also on our podcast. But for those who don't know anything about these games, can you tell us about, because what's cool about each game is that while you used similar rule sets, the settings and tones are and themes of the games are very different. Neurocity is a way different game than Warpland, and of course Hell Knight, even though we haven't seen it or played it yet, Hell Knight looks like a very, very different game compared to the last two. So can you tell us about each game, Neurocity, Warpland, and Hell Knight, and what are their main themes and what are those games about?
Yes. Neurocity is a tech noir dystopia inspired in 1984 from George Orwell and the movie Alphaville from Godard. You can think of it as a serious version of Paranoia. It has a very strong emphasis on stress mechanics and dealing with moral dilemmas and moral issues. It's like I said, it's like a noir game. The idea is for players they start working as operatives within the system, and they will eventually find out that the whole system is wrong. The system is run by an artificial intelligence, and one of the premises of Neurocity is that you do not know what's the origin of the city. You don't know what it is all about. How things came as they are. So the book comes with a few possibilities for these origins, and I think that it's very nice that every session of my games turns very differently from it has its own particular flavor because of this. Because I could play a session of Neurocity and I wouldn't know what's the deal, what's going on behind the city, even I as an author. So I think that I like that a lot. I like that the readers and the players make the game their own. I do that with all my games. And Warpland, it's a dark acid fantasy or a science fantasy. It's also a post-apocalyptic setting. We do not know if it is on Earth or maybe in another planet like Mars, but a previous advanced civilization had a war. They were called the Eloi against the Morlocks. That's a reference from the Time Machine from H.G. Wells. And in that war, they destroyed the essence of light and also the sun. So basically, the whole world is being infected or touched by a corrupted version of light. And this corrupted version of light does not seek to create, but it causes random mutations on everything living, on all living things. So, and there is also a very strong thing that deals with obscurantism. there is like a religion that prohibits knowledge. It prohibits reading and writing on the reason or on the basis that because of knowledge or because of science, the world became corrupted or became plummeted into chaos. It's also very interesting to see the characters like being, it's like, it seems like a Conan setting, but they will also have a lot of advanced relics of technology from the bygone age, but those relics are forbidden, and reading and writing is also forbidden, so all books are being burned. And again, players might be interested in finding out what happened, what was the previous civilization like? Is there a way to restore the balance of the world? At the same time, there is like a big black hole in the middle of the map that is sucking away everything. From that black hole, there are like demonic entities that lure warlocks with their power. So you have black magic and you have advanced technology and you have it's like a good mashup of various genres, and it somehow works out.
Warpland, I kind of got from it the sense of like you said, science, fiction, fantasy. So kind of like Flash Gordon, John Carter.
Yes, yes.
There's old pulp magazines.
Not so much over the top. I mean, it has little bit things of everything. Little things of Flash Gordons, of course. Little things of Conan, a bit of He-Man maybe also.
Yeah, I like your description to me the first time we were talking about Warpland. You said that a friend described it as a He-Man on acid, basically. I find that a pretty
Yes.
hilarious description of the game. So I had a good sense of Warpland, and after reading through it, I have a good idea of the world and everything. What is kind of the main? So we have some ideas of what Warpland's about. A little, like you said, a little bit of Flash Gordon, a little bit of Conan, a bunch of things kind of put together in your own unique vision. For Neurocity, what could people piece together to like understand what it's about? Like, is it close to the Matrix, or what pieces of media were inspired to make Neurocity?
Yes, as I said, I think that the most important pieces of media are 1984 from Orwell, Alphaville from Goddard, and also THX 1138 from George Lucas. I think that between those three movies, you have a very strong idea about Neurocity. You can also watch Dark City. That's also a good reference. Yeah, that's. I think that between those four, you will have a pretty good idea what it is about. It is a very bleak, dark setting, and as I said, it deals a lot with stress and suspense and dealing with authority and rejecting the orders of that authority and the consequences of not submitting to the system. I think it's a very good exercise. It was actually played a lot in law school in Mexico by a professor to deal with civilian rights.
That must be kind of cool knowing that your game has an influence out there besides people having fun and playing it, but like this lawyer is out there using it himself. That's pretty neat.
For the students,
Yeah, for
the
his students
professor
to teach his students. Like, that's really cool. What about Hell Knight? Because that game looks really cool, a very unique stylization to it that I'll let you just talk about. But besides talking to us about what Hell Knight is about, I have one additional question in that Warpland, there's connections to Neurocity. If people want, there could be some direct crossovers between your first two games. Maybe this will be a little teaser to the future, or maybe you don't want to spoil it, but is Hell Knight going to have any connection to the first two games of yours? And what is it about?
It wouldn't be so difficult to connect hell to that void that happens in Warpland. I don't think it was the main idea. My main intention was to, as always, to write something different. That's why the book is actually has a different format. My previous two books were 8.5 8.5. They were both symmetrical, and this is going to be a 6 by 9. And also the rules will be a bit condensed. It will be a bit more minimal because it will be more especially suited for one shots or low story arcs. But they will use the same workhorse system, my 2d6 roll under the stat system. And I really want to try my best at the horror genre, which I am a fan. And it eventually developed when play testing it. We realized that it was very hilarious. So humor became something very important about it, and it fitted very well because you know that B horror movies from the 80s, they always had black humor mixed up with ultra violence. So the whole concept made sense.
So is Hell Knight kind of like if you added more dark humor to the Nicolas Cage movie Mandy? Is that like a good description of what it could be like, or no?
Yes, I think it is a good description. Actually, I think that Mandy has a bit of humor, of course, and also lots of movie references to the 80s. I also changed my writing style a lot in Hell Knight because the writing style in Hell Knight appeals a lot to the reader, speaks to the reader, and makes fun of the reader. And I don't know, for example, the DM is called the Dark Master. All across the book, we find out that the demon's called Satan, the Dark Master, as well. So it's like it has all that funny breaking the fourth wall stuff.
So officially, I can be, as the Dark Master, the DM, I'm essentially Satan in a way.
Yes.
I love that. Yeah, because my players normally call me Satan, but in this case, it'll be for an actual reason. That's cool. So you were talking about media inspiration, and I guess we talked a little bit about it with Mandy, which is a great Nicolas Cage movie, and really, it sounds like it has a good. It captures the style of this game pretty well. Was there any other movies or books that led to inspiration for Hell Knight?
I think that the main inspiration is all the B movie phenomenon in the 80s, that it's a genre by itself, and you can have literally thousands of movies that deal with this sort of stuff. Yeah, I couldn't even begin to name one, and it would never end.
Makes sense.
I don't know, from Friday the 13th to, I don't know, I like Cronenberg a lot. I like John Carpenter a lot. I like Wes Craven. I don't know. There are so many guys and I like them all.
That makes sense.
Forgot to say that one of the premises of the setting is also that Satan is missing, and that's why hell is convoluted in a state of turmoil, and that is why the archdemons or the archons are escaping hell, and the characters need to capture them. So it somehow fits all the concept that the DM is actually Satan, the one missing from hell.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's a pretty neat twist. Yeah, because Warpland has the sun. The sun kind of disappeared, and in this, Satan is gone, and that's really cool. That in the end, kind of the DM is sort of Satan in a way, who's also kind of running this whole universe and world for the players.
Yes.
So, like a filmmaker
Absolutely.
or a screenwriter studies great scripts to learn how to format and write good movies. Did you have to study great role-playing games to learn, like you already had your own idea and maybe like your own mechanics of how you want to run this game and the world you want to do, but did you study role-playing games to learn how to like actually format and write role-playing games, or how did that learning come from?
Yes, I am constantly buying RPGs, especially indie RPGs, and reading for them, taking some ideas, taking what I think that works from them, learning both from their successes and their misses. Of course, yes, I for Hell Knight I must have read like 20 RPGs. Um, but also for the mechanics, I'm also always looking to improve the system that is a staple for me. Absolutely, yeah. I need to constantly be reading about that, not only in RPGs, but also in literature. I try that every game that I make has a sort of godfather of literature that sort of guides me or fuels with his wisdom and spirit my work. For Neurocity it was George Orwell. For Warpland, it was the Strugatsky brother that they wrote Hard to be a God, a book that became two movies, and both movies are great. Actually, the Russian version of Hard to be a God is always compared to Morgborg. And for Hell Knight, I decided that Hunter and Thompson will fit beautifully with him, with the whole concept, with the whole theme, because he made not only Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, that features a very good criticism about society, about modern society, but he also wrote Hell's Angels. That's also a beautiful essay about bikers and going on becoming like a modern savage, a person that submits to violence, to uncontrolled violence, and to their uncontrolled urges. And I think that Hell Knight deals a lot with that, to let the players just do their worst.
That makes sense. And with the cover of Hell Knight, you got a really cool poster as your main piece of art, which is kind of like a demonic look at like a Satan-like creature riding a chopper. And so is this game going to focus a lot on like motorcycle gangs? Is that going to be the main thing that people are going to be able to play characters who are in a motorcycle gang, or do you not have to be part of a gang?
An important aspect of the game is not 3 of the 5 classes start with a hell ride that is basically a demonic bike, is a biomechanical thing, entity. So they are more like mascots rather than machines. They have their own personalities, they have their own powers, they have their own personality quirks and their own names. The book has about 5 random tables designed for hell rides. And the other classes will also have several tables that deal with vehicles like vintage cars or that sort of stuff. So vehicles will be a part of the setting. Yes, I think that's an important part of the setting. It will also the book will also have some mechanics that deal with cars, with vehicles, like a mechanic for chases and a random table for chases and vehicle accidents and the consequences of these accidents. This is just an aspect, like ultraviolence. The book will also have 4 critical hit tables, 1 for each type of damage: slashing, blunt, piercing, and bullets.
So something that I'm very happy with this game and what you've been able to do with it is that, like you said, you're from Argentina, where the role-playing game scene isn't very big. In fact, when you had into Spanish, it didn't really take off very well. And right now, you have 3 role-playing games out right now, and you've done a very good job of, just as a single creator, branching out to make it so that people can find your game and play it. So it's really tough. Like, of course, Free League or Wizards of Coast, they have many people that run their social media accounts, and they put a lot of money into sponsored ads so people can find it, not really naturally, but just be able to find their game and hopefully get them to check it out. But you're doing this as a single game creator. Can you talk to us about not writing a game, but getting the word out on your role-playing game? Because you have a good size and pretty actually very interactive group on Facebook, which if people just type in Neurocity Warpland or even Hell Knight on Facebook, you should be able to find the Facebook page where Gavriel and a bunch of other people are constantly talking and put in different inspirational art or asking about the rules, but just talking about your games. But you have a really good sized group on Facebook. So can you talk to us about, as a single game creator, how do you get people to find your game, especially since most of the players are not going to be from your country?
At the beginning, to be honest, it was very difficult because I was an absolute newcomer. So getting the word out for Neurocity was very difficult and demanded a lot of interaction in social media, in Reddit and all the forums and Facebook and whatever. And understandably, people from the community were a bit adamant because they could only see like some of the art or some of the writing. They thought it was cool, but they didn't know who I was or if I had the capacity to finish a product or to make even a game. At the beginning, they thought. I remember people saying, "Okay, you are just making another Paranoia clone," or something like that. But well, eventually, I could show them that I could do something different. Luckily, by doing that, I earned a lot of friends, a lot of people from the community that helped me constantly and believe in my work, and I try to help them back. I think that one of the purposes of the stretch goals is also bringing some awareness of the people that help me, that have always helped me since the beginning, and that they are very talented guys and very passionate guys. I think that well, what we are seeing right now with the new OSR movement is wonderful. I think that it's wonderful that everyone is so passionate about trying indie stuff, that everybody wants to create their own stuff. I think that that's one of the key aspects of every movement, that everyone wants to participate and everyone connects with each other and has a saying and feels part of that community. I hope that more players from the other side come to us and find out that there really is something about playing indie games, indie RPG games that traditional games cannot give you. I have to say that I couldn't be more grateful with the way that the community has helped me and endorsed my projects. So I have only good things to say about it. Coming from a musical scene, because I'm also a musician, I was gratefully surprised.
What is next for you? So after Hell Knight, which I believe is out for another 40 days or so on Kickstarter, what do you have going on for this? Are you going to be taking a break from writing role-playing games? Do you have another idea that you might want to pursue into a fourth role-playing game? Or are you going to maybe think about doing installments or future expansions for any of the 3 role-playing games you put out? So what is next for you?
I am a bit of an anomaly. This for me is my only work, and I can somehow manage to survive doing this because I live in a third world country and the dollar currency helps me a lot. So I can basically spend 5 or 6 months doing the concept design behind a game and doing all the play testing and doing everything. So it works. I have to say it somehow works. I am very surprised that it works. And most people that I discuss it with, they are also surprised. But it does. So the thing is that I have to, of course, I have to keep creating. I cannot just take the luxury of having like a 2 or 3 months holiday from creating anything. So yes, I just launched a Tulu hack for Mothership that has a great take on stress mechanics and has been graphically designed by Rodrigo Vega. That is an incredible, great illustrator and graphic designer from Argentina. And we are probably going to do a take on that and do an RPG that is a sci-fi, but it will be a 60s sci-fi with the 60s aesthetics and the 60s preoccupations. No,
That's cool.
I think it's quite different from the Mothership angle. You know,
Yeah.
It mostly deals with exploration and with humanitarian concerns. The whole scenario is very different, and I think that we might use this Tulu hack for that. That works like a charm. I was very surprised that it worked so well. And I'm also working with trying to develop what might be defined as a post-apocalyptic superhero RPG. It will be called Meltdown, and you will hear about that for sure in a couple of months.
Oh, very cool. Meltdown, a superhero role-playing game. And that I'm excited to see your take on, because there are a couple good superhero role-playing games out there, but not a ton, especially for the superhero genre with Marvel and DC movies being so popular. You would think there would be some much bigger role-playing games for superhero genre, but there's really not. There's, I think Sentinel Games has one that's pretty good, but besides that, like Marvel only has one from I think like the early 2000s or 90s. DC had one that I played many years ago, but it was out and then they didn't really make much expansions for it, and it just died. So Meltdown, your superhero role-playing game, that should be fun, and that 60s space travel themed role-playing game seems cool. And congratulations on that. Is so cool that you're able to make this as your job. You're not forced to go to a job that you hate and then only do this as a side project. You can work on this full time. That's a dream, honestly. And also congrats on Hell Knight, because Hell Knight is doing very well, and I'm gonna put the Kickstarter link in the description below for people to check it out, and hopefully it looks interesting to you and you can back it. But yeah, congratulations on Hell Knight, because that's also doing very well.
Thank you, Austen. Hopefully we will reach the 666 backers to make the product into a hardback. I wanted to say that what I really strive to do, I think that the main difficulty I have whenever I develop a game is to make something that stands out as unique and different. So I do think that there are a couple of RPGs, superhero RPGs, and they are very good. But I wanted to explore a bit of something that I think that Aberrant only tried to do. Have you heard of Aberrant?
I have not,
RPG?
No.
It was from the same company, from White Wolf, I think. I think White Wolf made it. The main interesting thing about it is that it deals with superheroes, but from a more humanistic aspect. And the thing is that their superpowers causes a loss of humanity, you know, and also they are like uncontrollable power, and it ends up destroying them. So Meltdown will be mainly about that, of being a superhero, but if you use those powers, the chances for a meltdown will increase and might destroy you, or destroy your mind, or destroy your friends, or destroy, I don't know, a city, or change your appearance. So it will deal with that, and it will be post-apocalyptic.
Oh, that's cool. So like a much darker take on the superhero genre that's also post-apocalyptic.
Absolutely.
That's something I really like about your role-playing games, is that you take a similar genre and do something very different with it. You'll just talk about Meltdown. Superhero movies, there are like 6 of them a year, and it's gotten to the point that even though I love superhero movies, I miss the occasional one or two sometimes, just because there's so many out there, and I've kind of gotten the superhero fatigue. Your role-playing game isn't just your standard superhero genre. It is one that takes a darker look at it while also being in a post-apocalyptic setting, and that sounds super, super cool. And like Hell Knight is a take on B movies, but it's something that it's totally different. The idea of Satan being gone and kind of hell coming upon Earth because of it, that's a really neat idea. And the same thing for Warpland and Neurocity. So thank you very much for talking with me. And for everyone else, where should people check out your games? For like after Hell Knight is out, where can people find Neurocity, Warpland, and Hell Knight?
You will be able to find Hell Knight in Exalted Funeral. Exalted Funeral is distributing Hell Knight. We'll be fulfilling our pledges. Most likely, they will also be able to offer the hardback version of Warpland, which you can also get if you're a backer in Hell Knight. You can put as an add-on, or you can also find a Neurocity and Warpland as a print on demand in Drive-Thru RPG. And I think that it's also very interesting if any wants to join our Facebook group, self-referentially called Worlds of Quiroga, and we deal with all these worlds, and we discuss all types of genres, and everyone is invited to just post whatever they feel like. I think that it's very interesting that we are a community, but still we do not have a defined genre. We can talk about sci-fi, we can talk about fantasy, we can talk about horror, we can talk about philosophy behind RPGs. We share the same passions, and those passions are very eclectic. Or hectic. I don't know which is the correct word.
For everyone out there, thanks for listening, and thanks, Gavriel, for coming on to the podcast. It was nice chatting with you. And for everyone else out there, check out the links I'm going to put in the description below. And I will be talking about Warpland and Neurocity in a future episode very soon. So stay tuned for that. This is Austen. I'll be talking to everyone next time on the next episode of the Beer and Pretzel Podcast.